All right. Hello. Hi, everybody. Uh, decided to let you see my microphone today because my friend Brad had his microphone right up near his face and he sounded so good and I got jealous. So it's a little crooked, but so am I. So here's my mic, and hopefully the sound is fantastic and wonderful. I am so excited to be here with you all today. I know Kathy's coming today. I hope Betsy's here. I hope Lisa's here. I hope y'all are coming on board. Say hello over in the chat when you show up if you're able. If you are, for whatever reason, not able to join the live chat, you are definitely welcome to shoot me a Facebook message or send me a note on my Facebook page where I mention Ask a Priest, so that you can, I don't know, ask me any question you want and see what happens. Good morning, Lisa Clemens. Good morning, Lisa Grubbs. Oh gosh. Okay. So this is the last time that I'm doing this before I go on vacation. I am taking a vacation. And I'm going to take off 3 weeks. So don't fall apart on me, people. You'll be all right. And then we'll come back together. We'll do this again in August. I don't know. Like, I love doing this so much. I love being able to interact with y'all this way. And I hope we can keep getting people in and asking tough questions. I want to jump into a question that was asked last week, and I've spent about 20 minutes on it or more. And I feel like I totally flubbed answering the question. So I'm going to jump in and get back into that a little bit. But I also want to acknowledge the questions that are here. First of all, let me answer the easy stuff first. Lisa Grubbs asked, what are we doing on vacation? Sounds great. It is great. I'm very excited to just get some time off. We are moving down the street, and we're going to spend almost the entire vacation. The first week will be prepping for the move, and then the final 2 weeks will be, I guess, settling into the house. So the real vacation is just not working. It has been, without being like, oh, woe is me. The burden of really hoping to pastor everyone well and take care of people in a way that is meaningful and impactful during an unprecedented pandemic and a time of incredible social strife has, while trying to manage a budget and a staff and have 3 kids at home and get ready for a move, has been really painful, really difficult. So I'm looking forward to some time to just breathe, to have the move over with, even if there's like stuff to do, have the move over with, and to not focus on you all for a few weeks. Not because I don't love it. You all know I love it, like love it, but just so I can just not for a little bit and get my head back and breathe a little bit and get in the game. So I'm very excited about that. Lisa Clemens coming at us fast with a God and guns question. I've heard that guns aren't the problem, but morals. I know guns weren't around when the Bible was written, but is there anything we can understand from it on this topic? Okay, fantastic. Actually, believe it or not, I think we're going to talk about God and guns the same way that I want to come back and talk about what I was talking about last week, specifically talking about the church and LGBTQ plus rights and what that looks like. And not just rights, but like their presence, the presence of LGBTQ plus people in the life of the church and in the life of our culture and our community. I want to talk about that really, really in a way that I didn't last week. And I feel like I really had a missed opportunity. You could tell if you were with us last week and you saw me talking about it, I said a lot of stuff. Some of it was smart and some of it was less smart, but a lot of it at the end, I just felt like I hadn't said the thing that needed to be said. And this is what I want to say. Okay. I said some of this, but I want to be really clear. Okay. So for the Christian, the primary reality of our life is who Jesus is in our lives. This is the first and guiding principle of our existence as Christians. Jesus is Lord. Jesus is the one we follow. Jesus is the one whose life makes life understandable to us. Jesus is the one whose life gives us life and helps us to understand what it means to live in this world. We want to pay attention to how Jesus lives in our scriptures, and then how the first Christians seek to live into some sort of fellowship with Jesus even after his ascension. So Jesus isn't bodily present, and yet people are seeking to live into and live into this reality of Jesus even after his ascension, even without his physical presence the way we think of it, if it's a spiritual presence, right? Okay, I'm already feeling like I'm losing it, but I think I'm still here. Okay. What does Jesus do? Jesus lives a life in service and care for others for the purpose of bringing them into deeper connection with what he calls the Father, God, right? He seeks to heal people who are ill. He seeks also, when you pay attention to his healing, the healings that Jesus undertakes, if that's the right word, have a restorative element to them. It's not just about making people feel better. It is about enabling them and empowering them to live more fully into the communities of their lives. Many times the things that are quote unquote wrong with people, well, they're not quote unquote wrong. Things that are wrong about people are also things that keep them from being able to live in community with others. The way that Jesus treats those people suggests that it's not something that is, it's not their fault. First of all, that something has happened to them. But secondly, the idea that they would be out of community is absurd to Jesus. Jesus doesn't wait till people are healed before he touches them. He touches them and this heals them. He cares for them and speaks to them and loves them and humanizes them, and this is a healing process. Okay. So the work that Jesus does is a process of healing and restoring to community. That's what he's about. Okay. The teaching of Jesus is a teaching about what love and mercy, justice and peace look like in real time for our lives, how we treat each other. Jesus is laser focused on us recognizing God's presence in the world, and our recognizing God's presence in each other, and our recognizing God's presence in places we did not expect otherwise. Jesus seeks to not just to reveal God's presence to the people right in front of them, but to give people the capacity to recognize God's presence as an ongoing reality, even when he's not there bodily. Jesus seeks to equip you and I with the capacity to see God's presence wherever we go and to recognize the presence and the blessing of God in others. Jesus lives for this. Jesus dies for this. And according to our stories, according to our scriptures, according to our faith, death cannot hold Jesus because Jesus is God and God is love. So love wins. Love lives. Okay? What does all this have to do, I think, when you with both God and guns, as you bring up, or with questions around LGBTQ plus inclusion? It is my relationship with God in Jesus Christ that has enabled me to, and it is my following Jesus and paying attention to who Jesus is that has given me, as Jesus says, eyes for the kingdom. The ability, the ability, not as some sort of soothsayer or prophet, but the ability simply as a Christian to recognize God's presence and blessing in others, and God's pleasant presence and blessing in places I could not have expected. God's ability to heal, God's ability to care, to be present and active in this world, not as I want it to be, but as it is. And it's because Jesus has shown me that life can be lived with that kind of love, a love that reveals to me the presence of God in others and reveals to me the reality of God's blessing in places I couldn't have imagined. That in my case personally, God is able to help me see in Jesus blessing in people that my culture, my church had said were actually sinful or were curses. I was raised to believe that what we called it, homosexuality was a sin. That's how we talked about it. And it was a sin because it was a sin, basically. It was because it was. It was like self-explanatory. The scriptural backing for it is pretty flimsy, frankly. When you look at the overall breadth and depth of what the scriptures are trying to accomplish in terms of us recognizing God's presence and then living as if that's true and participating with God in the making of justice and the bringing of mercy and peace into this world. The obsession with sexuality is flimsy and shallow, frankly, in terms of the way that we've tried to make it this thing, and also our insistence that the world is that an ordered world, the Christian insistence that the ordering of God is such that essentially to be a cisgender heterosexual person is ideal, and frankly to be a cisgender heterosexual male is the best, and frankly the lighter your skin the better off you are too. These things are lived out in the Christian culture that we have experienced, so many of us. When I was 13, my dad came out of the closet, and I had been taught very specific things about what gay people were like from my church. And meanwhile, I had been raised by one. I had been raised by a gay person who had always been gay, who was in the closet, but had always been gay, who taught me about Jesus, who made sure I went to church, who made sure I learned how to pray, not because he was scared of hell, not because he was nervous of what would happen, not because he was trying to pray the gay away or any of those things, but because he believed in Jesus and wanted me to too. He taught me to think about Jesus. He taught me to think about how Jesus was working in the world. He taught me to pay attention to what forgiveness meant, to pay attention to others, and to love them for who they were. He treated me with respect and kindness like a good father would treat a son, and loved me fiercely and taught me how to love in so many ways. And so when he came out, it was so clear to me where Jesus was. I didn't have the language for that at 13. I wouldn't have said, here's Jesus. That's a language I've developed just in the last couple of years. But the truth of it was so clear to me, because here is this teaching from my church about the corrosive nature of those people and what they do and how it's evil and bad and how they're probably going to hell, and all of that stuff. And on the other hand was my actual lived reality, combined with my understanding of who Jesus was as the center of all love and grace. And my reality was, very quickly, I was able to say, I don't understand all this, but I know what I believe now. My opinion about sexuality changed one day in 1993, irrevocably changed like that. And I can never go back. But it's not just my opinion about sexuality that was transformed that day, is it? It was a moment when I realized what I truly believed about Jesus and how I wanted to live my life in relationship with Jesus and with you because of Jesus. That changed. My relationship with scriptures changed. My relationship with Jesus changed that day because I was given this. I mean, it was so clear. Column A, a very specific way, what I would call scriptural hermeneutic, which is to say a very specific way of reading the Bible that teaches you to read the Bible and memorize it and understand that everything in here is an inerrant, infallible law of how you should live your life if you want to go to heaven when you die. And on the other hand was my actual lived experience with God, not in a way, by the way, that meant scriptures were nothing, that they don't matter. It wasn't scriptures versus non-scriptures. It was a recognition that if all the things I'd been taught in scriptures were true about, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and about the way that Jesus chose to live and love, and the way that Jesus showed the kingdom of God's presence in the world, if those things were genuine and true and real, then this way that I had approached God and approached scriptures and had been taught wasn't going to work. So what I did last week was try to convince you of sort of scriptural ways or whatever. But what I would rather say is, I don't really want to say well, if you believe in God and read this the right way, then you will know what God's opinion on guns would be. What I would rather do is say, Jesus is Lord, not as a dismissal or a denial of anything, but Jesus is Lord, and the commandment to follow Jesus, to obey Jesus, leads us down this path of humanizing others, recognizing the humanity in others such that we are meant to love them for who they are, not for who we want them to be, and love this world in a way where we recognize God's blessing and presence in it. So many of us are taught that this world is that God's creation is a hostile place that is sort of like enemy territory. There are Christian traditions that basically teach that. And there's language around of this, in this world, not of this world. And I understand that. And Paul's sort of conversation in Romans around the flesh versus the spirit. These are important things to understand in their contexts. None of them add up to, this is a terrible place and we've just got to survive it. God took on human flesh because God loves humanity. And if God can find God's self in humanity by taking on our flesh, why would we be ashamed of our flesh? We should love ourselves and love one another, and we should recognize the presence of God and the faithfulness and the blessing of others who our tribes have traditionally said are not okay. It's not just a set of rules. It's a mentality we want to have. We want to look at the world always seeking that kind of blessing, always seeking to understand how we can serve Christ in others, how we can recognize the presence of Christ in another person and then serve that person. We should be living in that reality. And when someone who is different from what we had expected about God shows up in our lives and shows us something different about who God is, we've got to be faithful enough to follow Jesus down that path and be humble enough to say, I didn't know God could be there. And repent genuinely of our own selfishness and narrowness and say, I didn't see it. And now I see it. And while I am a straight, cisgender, heterosexual, etc. male, I'm not just talking to cishet men or whatever. I know from my talking with my dad and from many of his friends that people growing up that are not cisgender heterosexual can internalize a lot of pain and internalize a lot of hatred and judgment because of the culture telling them things about themselves. And so part of what I want us to be able to do is not only to be able to see the blessing in others where we wouldn't expect it, but oh my God, to see the blessing in ourselves, to recognize God's presence in us. We are not God, not any one of us. And I don't have some pantheistic theology where God is everything or everything is God. But our scriptures and our teachings, our catechism, our worship point towards the reality of God's presence in all things, because God chooses to be present in those places. And if we are willing to see God's presence outside of what we are normally used to, how will it change the way that we act? How will it change the way that we see God? How will it change our understanding of something we thought was a sin? And that's where I go back to what I was talking about last week when Paul says, if you're loving your neighbor, you are fulfilling the commandment. And Jesus says this too. That the way that we live into love is the fulfilling of the law. The Torah is fulfilled when we love one another and care for one another. So if something is not keeping us from experiencing that love. And in fact, if something is teaching us new things about that love, then it must be of God. And we want to pay attention to that. And we want to allow ourselves to be transformed and changed by that. Think about the way our country is right now. We've all picked our sides, right? Very few people are actually interested in their mind being changed about anything right now. Some of us will talk about it openly. Some of us will be very quiet about it, but we've all picked our sides on everything. We have an opinion about everything. What if we genuinely were able to be humble and recognize that other people might know something we don't know? What if we sought to recognize God's presence in others? What's funny is I think we're scared that if we do that, we'll somehow become listless or useless or have no opinions and just be like, everybody's fine, and then become moral relativists or something that have no teeth. That has not been my experience. My experience personally has been the more I have sought to understand the humanity of others, the more in love with them I become, and the more convicted about caring for others I become, the louder I am. I never, guys, I mean, honestly, never would have talked about justice the way I talk about it now, 3-4 years ago. Not because I didn't believe in justice. I mean, if you said, Phil, justice, I'd be like, yeah, justice is great. But it wasn't part of my everyday lingo because I was hanging out in my own little privilege bubble and not worrying about it. As I've allowed that bubble to be punctured, and as I've allowed myself to seek the humanity and understand other people's humanity, who they are and how they are, and operate from the perspective of, I wonder where I will see God in that person when I talk with them. It has not lulled me to sleep. It has woken me up. It has not glossed over my eyes and made me sort of, foggy. It has made me more clear-eyed about this world. At the beginning of this whole thing, I was talking about sort of all the different things that I feel personally as Phil, like I'm carrying, right? The burdens or whatever, the life. And in the midst of all this, I have never been more clear about God's presence in our world than I am right now. And I can't explain it. It's not like, let me give you the rationale for that. Well, what's your reason? My reason is I feel God's presence. Like, that's like being like, if you were like, man, I feel I'm so gonna undermine the significance of what I just said. Like, I deeply undermine it. Are you ready? It's like if someone's like, feeling like sushi tonight, and you're like, why do you feel like sushi? What do you mean why? I just like, a feeling, like an awareness of like what you want, right? Like, I feel like listening to yesterday. I just felt like listening to Randy Newman. Why? What's going on? I don't know. I just wanted to hear his voice, right? I don't have a reason like, oh, let me give you the 5 points as to why I recognize God's presence in the world right now like I never have before. I am telling you, I am seeing God all over in places in a way that I never have before. And it's not making life easy, but it is filling me with a sense of purpose. And it is giving me a like a bedrock of understanding that I am not, and you and I are not alone in what we're going through. I don't know, Lisa, honestly, how to give an example of that. I'm not trying to be like rude or dismissive. I'm like literally thinking it out, right? I didn't know I was going to talk about this when I started, but so let me like, the things that we are being made to ask ourselves as a country because of our response to this pandemic, the questions that are being asked, we couldn't have come up with those questions. It's like God brought them forward. What are your values? What are your priorities? God is asking us those questions. God took, and I want to be really careful with what I'm about to say. George Floyd was murdered. God didn't murder him. God was murdered with George Floyd that day. That's what Jesus teaches us. But God transformed that moment of horror into what we are seeing today, where real change is being pushed for and accomplished. And people are having conversations about justice, real, true equity, and equal representation and protection, and about the systems that uphold oppression and marginalization. We are talking about those things differently. Even the arguments we're having are different than they've ever been before. Thank God for that. And when I say thank, I mean literally, I thank God for that. This is what, there's this moment, and I've talked about it, I think, before, but there's this moment in Genesis where, Joseph's brothers, first they try to kill him. Then they decide not to kill him. They decide to trade him away, sell him basically into slavery. He ends up in Egypt. He ends up being exploited in Egypt. But he keeps, because he is this, in the story of Genesis, he's the carrier of this blessing. So he just Josephs himself into a place of great power, because that's how he rolls. And as you recall the story, his position of power in Egypt allows him to actually, puts him in a position where he's able to pronounce judgment on his brothers, and he saves their lives and ends up saving all of the people that are the sons of Israel, that become the tribes of Israel, that become the country Israel. Joseph does that. And when his brothers come to him, they keep waiting for him to be like, you're just going to wait till dad dies and then you're going to kill us, right? Like, this is like, you want us dead, right? For what we did to you. And what Joseph said is, you meant what you did was evil. God used it for good. He doesn't say you thought you were doing something evil, but God said it was a good thing, or you thought this thing was bad, but in fact it was good. The thing you did was evil. God was present in not present in a way that God made you do something evil, but God was present in the situation. And through God's presence, your evil was used for something new, restorative, salvific. A deliverance occurs because of this that is life-saving on a level we can't fathom. And I know that we would say, we would have it that God did not allow that thing to happen. I get it. This is the deep mystery of faith, that we would believe in a God who allows certain things to happen. I get it. And I'm not going to answer that beautifully today. But if God is present and dying with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with Ahmaud Arbery, if God is, and the countless others, it's just, you start to name names, and when God is present there, these moments become transformative and allow us as a people, not just allow us, force us as a people to confront that which is wrong with us and to work with God towards real life justice, mercy, and peace. And my God, we're learning so much about ourselves right now. The death of who we thought we were. The death of who we thought we were. Many of us So many of us already knew this stuff. And there's a lot of pain there too. For those who have understood these things for so long, to see Johnny come lately is like me show up and go like, I get it now. I get that. God is working here, right? The goal is to continue to live into our humanity with grace and dignity, and to recognize the grace and dignity that of God that is present in others. He's 3. 3-year-olds are all of them narcissistic sociopaths. That you love, right? It's ridiculous. Let's talk about guns. Let's talk about guns and God. Lisa, I love this question. I have been a gun owner at different times in my life. I don't currently have any. I used to really enjoy shooting guns. I enjoy it less now, but there was not a single moment that changed for me. So I don't want to be like, and then I had this revelation. I didn't really. I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't know. Think about all the things I just said, if you can. If our purpose is the humanization of others and to care for others and to steward life, if our purpose is to participate with God in the bringing of justice, love, and peace, for the purpose of restoring this whole world into right relationship with God, creation, one another, and themselves. Okay? That's how catechism talk. I'm starting to memorize it. If that's the work, I think the question needs to be, where do guns live in that reality? And I'm not asking it ironically or sarcastically. Genuinely or rhetorically for rhetorical effect, right? Where do they fit? Traditionally, Christians who've had any sort of coherence in their thought, which knocks a lot of modern Christians, American Christians, right out of the conversation. Historically, the church has come down in 2 areas that seem to make the most sense. One is utter commitment to nonviolence. We don't have any examples of Jesus being truly violent. People try to use the example of him like turning over tables and driving people out of the temple, but okay, an outburst is not. No one got sent to the hospital. Jesus didn't kill anybody, and Jesus didn't tell anyone to kill anyone. In fact, Jesus kind of talked about not doing it. We also know Jesus talked to centurions and soldiers and never told them to lay down their arms. John the Baptist, the same. He would preach to a lot of people, and when he was preached to soldiers, the soldiers say, what should we do? He said, essentially, don't exploit people. He didn't say, quit your jobs. So we don't have examples of Jesus living violently, and we know that his first followers chose paths of nonviolence. We know this. This should tell us something, right? At the same time, there is a theory that was developed, most I think sort of introduced to the Christian world in terms of its its development as something called just war. Augustine sort of really brought this to the front. And the idea being that there were times when, even when it is regrettable, it's the best bad option. That, and you know the examples. If someone breaks into your house and is going to harm your family, shooting them rather than allowing something to happen to your family. Killing Hitler, right? There was a very specific set of guidelines for that Augustine set up, and I don't know them super well, so I'm not going to pretend I do. But you can find it, you can Google it. Okay. The idea there was not that it was great and glorious and that we should ever enjoy or be excited about harming anyone else, ever. But in just war theory, you're given, in a world where there is no perfect choice, you are given two awful choices. Which do you choose? And the idea that sometimes the less awful choice is to take a life. That's the idea. Okay? So those two basic ideas both acknowledge the sinfulness inherent in taking another life, both acknowledge the sanctity of humanity, both acknowledge the reality that each person is made in God's image, and that if someone's life is taken, it's grievous and painful. One says we live by an example of never doing it, and the other says sometimes we're going to do it, and we're not psyched about it. And in a perfect world, the swords will be beaten into plowshares, and we will study war no more. Both of these things have problems, and both of these things have the capacity to, I think, embody faith, to be faithful to God. And totally frankly, I go back and forth. But I would say, Lisa Clemens says, I was watching Netflix show The Messiah. I would love to know how that is. And the Messiah handed a gun to another man. It was jarring, though that seems to be the point of the show. Yeah, and I can't speak to the context of the show because I don't know, but the idea of God handing someone a gun should be jarring. I think our culture, and again, I've been a gun owner. I was for a period of time. I belonged for a period of time to the NRA. I don't currently, but I have family and friends that do, and I'm not anti firearms as things that exist, and nor am I anti people necessarily owning them. I mean, that's not really that's not where I'm at right now. The glorification of firearms, the glorification of a man with a gun, the way that we fetishize killing machines, the way that we worship at the altar of violence to make things right is deeply sinful, profoundly problematic. How can we divorce our belief that there is an appropriate place for guns in any culture? How can we divorce that from gun worship and from the worship of gun culture? That's a question America has to ask if it's going to get serious. I actually think the question about whether they should all exist or not all exist, if everyone should have one or no one should have one, is so typical of the way Americans talk about this stuff. And I say Americans not because I'm like secretly wishing we'd all become Finnish or Swiss or something. I don't. It's literally because it's the context I have. I'm not idealizing some other culture. I think I'm not going to fetishize or idealize some other culture and decide they've got it figured out. I just know our culture really well, having spent all 41 now of my years in it, with the exception of 4 months in Italy when I was a kid or younger. My life has been here. These are my people. Y'all are my people, and I'm one of you. And our obsession with guns is a sickness. It's a sickness. I'm not saying that they can't ever be here. I'm saying the way that we exist with them and treat them is unhealthy, deeply unhealthy. So I'm less concerned with saying, here is God's prohibition against you owning a firearm, Lisa. And I've known more than one woman who has felt it necessary for them to have a firearm on them for their own protection against men in their personal safety. And you have and we live in a country where you have a right to make that call. So I think I can't speak conclusively personally from if I think, if I'm a nonviolent, if I'm a pacifist, as they say, or a just war person, I can say conclusively that I'm not at all comfortable with our glorification of violence in our culture. And I'm just as guilty of that in so many ways in terms of the media that I consume. Where is nonviolent heroism? Why are heroic acts always paired with harming others? Why can we not think about winning or I don't even call it winning, right? Because winning means somebody else loses. Why can't we even consider stories of heroism that don't include violence against the enemy? What's wrong with us, man? Oh yeah, Lisa Grubbs just said it. Glorification of violence in movies. I mean, that's my bread and butter. I love that stuff. I love it. I'm so saturated in this culture I was raised in this violence. So I wonder about that, I want us to keep coming back to where God is present. Not just in this blog podcast thing, whatever this thing is that I do. This is not a blog. That was the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Like in our lives, I want us as a people, we should be people who are seeking and serving Christ in all, who are connected with reverence and love to our scriptures, with the understanding that our scriptures point to the truth of Jesus' presence and saving work in the world. How do I read the Bible? How do I read the Bible? What about these verses that are difficult? If you are convinced that Jesus is for you, and that you are part of God's story, and that you are loved in the midst of all of your you-ness, the Bible becomes a lot less scary. It doesn't own you, but you don't have to hide from it. You can read a story and be like, I don't know how to deal with that, and that's okay. Or you can say, I'm not comfortable with that, and you can step away from it. Or you can say, I'm not comfortable with that, and dig deeper and find out things about yourself and about the world, find out things that you believe, find out a deeper understanding of what you think the authors were trying to convey about the truth of God, trying to understand what God might have been trying to convey about God's self in this space. But you can't. If you're in a relationship where you are always scared that you are going to be kicked out, that you are the inferior in the relationship, and that you are just waiting for the other shoe to drop, if you are in a relationship like that, you are never in a place of safety and security enough that you can let your guard down and be vulnerable and then really experience mutuality, right? If you are in a relationship, I'll say it again, if you are in a relationship that is abusive, if you are in a relationship where you are taught that the other person is right and you are wrong always, and you are taught that you're lucky to be in it. You lucky duck, because I could do so much better than you. If that's if you were in a human relationship like that with that, we would call that abusive and manipulative. And yet that is exactly the kind of relationship so many of us experience with God through our churches. If we can break free of that, be liberated from that kind of manipulative understanding of our connection to God, and understand that we are invited to participate in loving mutuality with the God who made us, that the work of justice, peace, and love that is given to us is not given to us so that we can prove ourselves worthy of God, but because in God's love, God has chosen to share this work with us. So as God does the restorative work, the recovering, the reconciliatory work of this world, we are invited, because it's in our DNA to do so, to care for and love this world. If you can be liberated from the manipulative, one-sided, I have to prove to God so I can go to the right place when I die, if you can be liberated from that kind of understanding of your relationship with God and be introduced to the true God that is present in Jesus Christ, that loves you for who you are and is present for you and living for you, dying for you and living again for you as you are, and is inviting you into the work of eternal life as a part of a covenant of mutuality, of shared love and trust. If you're thinking about God that way, you will read the Bible differently, and you will ask questions, and you will be able to be vulnerable, and you will be able to allow yourself to be transformed. You will be able to allow yourself to shift and change in a way that is healthy and loving and makes you more whole. And you'll be able to see God's presence in other people that you never thought you could see it there. And you'll be able to think one thing about guns, and the person next to you will think something different about guns, and you will learn how to have conversations with them and try to understand each other. And maybe you can try to convince each other, maybe that you need to. Maybe that's what needs to happen. But you will not make your life about fixing other people like you think you're supposed to be fixed. The glorification of violence is the glorification of this idea that might makes right, and that we can win. We can conquer. My body can conquer your body. My dad can beat up your dad. My gun's bigger than your gun, and I'm better at using it. Therefore, I'm okay. The security we sense in the presence of God isn't the security of, I've got the biggest gun, so I'm okay. The security that we find in the presence of God is in the movement of millions of people who are calling for justice and seeking transformation of our society and insisting on the dignity of every human being. The difference to me is so clear, right? My dog really needs to go out. If I don't let him out, bad things could happen. Ask me another question when I come back. He didn't need to go out. He needed to come in, which is also important because it's really hot out there. All right, I got like 10 more minutes, and then I'm going on vacation. I'm not really going on vacation till like Friday, but I'm going on vacation from this after 10 minutes. So what you got? Lisa and Lisa, you're the only ones typing. So let's see if I got anything on the Facebook. Any questions for me here? My friend Mark says, because I'm wearing a red hat in the picture, I don't have my glasses on. Is that a MAGA hat you are wearing? Well, it's a Cincinnati Reds hat, and you all know that. Come on, Mark. All right. Also, put your glasses on. Come on. Let's see if I got any other questions. Nope. No other questions. The new house is in Hyde Park. It's about a half mile from the church and about a half mile from the school. So when we get to start going back to those places, we'll be in a wonderful position. We're very excited about that. I'm going to write about it today, actually, for my blog post, for this week. I'm going to talk a little bit about decisions that we've made to spend less money on our house so that we can save more money, but also so that we can spend more money elsewhere. We want to give more money away than we've been giving away. And we want to make our lives more, we want to make the way we live our lives more in line with what we say our values are. We would like our stated values and our lived experience to actually be closer to one another. And so we've made a decision to downsize, to spend less money on our house, and to be able to save more and spend more other places to give more away. And so we're seeking to live into that. I'm going to write a little bit about that today because I'm going to start writing about how I need people to give to the church and make commitments to the church for the next year, which is always a fun conversation because it's just everybody gets super uncomfortable. We're super uncomfortable about talking about money in the church. So my favorite thing is the things people are uncomfortable with, right? So we'll talk about that. And I'm going to be writing a little bit about that. And then going on vacation, piss everybody off and then go away. We'll see. But I am going to write about that. I'm going to write about this experience that I had that helped me realize that I was living in a way where all I was trying to do was just keep afloat and keep up with what I thought I was supposed to be thought was, how my lawn was supposed to look, or how people, keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. I fell into that trap like anybody would, or like many people have, I should say. Some people are able not to. And sort of my sort of knock upside the head that helped me realize that that wasn't how I wanted to live. And the decisions that we've had to make as a family in light of that. So this move is a very specific move. It's a move, I believe, towards aligning our stated values with our lived experience, as I would say. I think that's the language I am using. So why does church talk about give as you are able versus tithe or sacrificial giving? I think one thing is the church just doesn't want to seem like a bunch of jerks. Also, the tithe I think we should be really careful with the language of tithe, because the tithe was described was set forth as a way to live as Israel, where the tithe was used for very specific things, but it helped to sustain a whole tribe of people who had consecrated their lives to the church. Well, not the church, that didn't exist at the time, to the worship of God and to that work. The Levites were meant to consecrate themselves to that work, and this money was meant to go to make that happen. And they were also supposed to oversee the bringing of justice and all this other stuff. So the tithe reality, that 10% of your giving, is if we're going to be biblical literalists there, why not other places? I find it funny that people who don't want to be biblical literalists elsewhere all of a sudden are like, let's talk about the tithe. And I'm like, I know Episcopalians who aren't sure if they believe in the resurrection, but think that churches should be tithing to the diocese, right? I'm like, all right, well, all right, game on, I guess. So I would want to, and then in terms of sacrificial giving, I think it's important. I think how we talk about this stuff is so tricky, because we live in a market culture and we live in a reality where you don't have to give. So how do I convince you that it's right to give in a way that is not shaming? And and sacrificial giving as a language, it's sort of like saying why you should give more. Well, some people can't give more or shouldn't give more. And the idea that here's the thing that's tricky for me, Lisa. How would I say this? I'm concerned about relational dynamics wherein you feel like you're always at a deficit and there's always more you could be doing. My concern with people at church and this is both people, is that people either think they're not doing enough or they think other people aren't doing enough. And we are in this constant scarcity mindset that we would be better if other people would just be better, or we would be better if we would just act better. And so then church really is a vehicle for shaming us into living better lives. And what does it look like for us to dismantle that? At the same time, as the pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber once said, this shit costs money, right? We employ people. We have who are ministering to others and who are equipping others for ministry in powerful ways. And we have a building that, under almost any other circumstance, we are using 7 days a week to be a centerpiece for grace and blessing in our neighborhood. And and we have people who want to lead our congregation into places where we are being transformed, where we are able to transform others, and we are able to make an impact on the community around us by serving them with humility, compassion, and grace and faithfulness. That isn't free, and nothing that you've ever cared for was free. And then in terms of the way that you live your life, like, my goodness, the idea that something should be there for you and that you wouldn't give something of yourself to see it happen is absurd. Everything about giving to the church makes sense to me now that I run a church. But I mean, I love it. I love this community, and it makes sense for us to invest in the things that we love so that they can continue to grow and develop. How do we do that in a way that's not shaming? How do we do that in a way that is not exploitative? How do we do that in a way that does not foster a sense of deficit and scarcity, but enables and empowers people to live into the abundance of God? So those are questions. Those are things that I think about, right? So I'll be writing on that. Hopefully it'll change people's hearts and minds, and giving will be okay even during this uncertain time. That is very much my hope. It is concerning our relationship with money. I mean, when I just talked about guns and sex, our relationship with money is deeply fraught. Mine is. It's an ongoing process of seeking to understand its place in my life and how not to allow it to be Lord in my life. Right. So, a couple things. Gillian Welch is my favorite singer alive and performing today. And her partner, Dave Rawlings, is like my second favorite, I guess. And they perform together with either her as the front person or him as the front person. They live together outside of Nashville, or in Nashville, anyway, somewhere in the Nashville area. And during this pandemic, they pulled out a reel-to-reel recorder and they recorded themselves together singing a bunch of songs, I guess 10 songs, and they put it out as an album of covers of stuff. 2 Dylan songs, one by Elizabeth Cotton, some other, one by John Prine, and some other traditional tunes. And it is just one of my favorite things immediately. And so I hope that you will listen to some Gillian Welch, Dave Rawlings. The new album is called, I think it's called All the Good Things Are Gone, or something like really uplifting like that. Let's see here. It's called All the Good Times Are Past and Gone, which is a title of an old time song that they cover. I love it. I love that so much. I've been listening to that a lot. I introduced a friend to Townes Van Zandt last night, so I feel like a hero for that. Run the Jewels, Killer Mike, that new album is astounding. I've only listened to it once and it blew my mind. And I've been listening to some Randy Newman the past couple of days because Randy Newman always makes me feel better. Always. I'm gonna go on vacation soon. I'll miss you guys. I really love this thing that we do, and I will be back, and we're gonna do it when I come back. We're gonna do this. So I hope that you will hold me in prayer, and know that I will be praying for you and with you. And hopefully when I come back, I'll be tanned, rested, and ready for the next chapter. in the life of this church and in the life of our shared life. Yeah. And I didn't see the message until just now, but Lisa Clemens, I am glad that you are able to give online, and we will continue to try to develop ways to make that easy. And like, that's the kind of thing where we know that that's the right thing to do, but if you get too excited about it, maybe you're, maybe you're you don't want to be exploitative. I mean, that's the thing, right? Thank you guys so much. I didn't see Betsy here this morning. Did I? Betsy, are you here? If so, you're quiet. I don't like that. All right. Well, my love to you all. Thank you for your time today. I hope I was helpful in some ways. Always fun to talk about Jesus with you, and always glad to have this opportunity for conversation. So if you have questions that come up over the next couple of weeks, save them up and maybe send me some messages and say, or emails or whatever, and say, when you get back, we're going to talk about this. And I won't do any work, but I'll, when I come back, I'll look at those and we can start to figure out what's next. Okay. All right. I'll talk to y'all later.